Uh, I bet every one of us have some things that mean a lot to us, and it's not because of value, it's just because of comfort. You might have that pair of sweatpants or something that they're not pretty, you wouldn't necessarily wear them out anywhere, but they're just comfortable. Or you have your favorite shorts that you would wear, that you wear around the house, or just, they're uncomfortable. Maybe something that makes you comfortable is having some money. That's your comfort item. You feel better when you've got the money. Or you've got that pair of shoes that are just wore slam out, but you won't get rid of them because they are so comfortable. That's the reason we keep things like this. And as you look on the screen, I bet some of you have got a recliner somewhere that you will not let your wife get rid of. That's what I've told Janice. She's been wanting to get rid of ours I said, you can change anything in the house you want, but the recliner's staying right there. The house can fall down around that recliner. It's broke in just right. You know how that is. We've got those things that are comfortable. They make us feel good. We don't want to get rid of them because they are comfortable. And all of these things none of these things are bad. They're all good things. But they become bad when we take them in the wrong doses. Have you ever noticed that eventually comfort and obedience butt heads? Comfort and obedience to God eventually are going to butt heads. They're going to come into conflict. Why is that? Because God didn't call us to a life of comfort. He called us to a life of faithfulness, a life of obedience. We're in the middle of our series that we're calling Giants, where we're using the Old Testament story of David and Goliath as our learning center, our battlefield, to learn how we're going to face the giants in our lives, how we can defeat the giants in our lives. And each and every one of us have a giant that we're battling. It may be a giant that a lot of people know about, or it may be one that's just a secret one that you know about. But every one of us do. We've talked about the giant of fear and how that can rule our lives. Eric did such a great job last week talking about the giant of rejection. And those are two giants that we've got to deal with in our lives. And we're going to talk about one today. This week, the giant is comfort. And you're going, are you kidding me? You're going to go from fear and rejection to comfort, and that's a giant? You see, comfort or the desire to live comfortably is as much a giant as fear or rejection, or the ones we'll talk about in the weeks to come. This giant is very sneaky. It's very tricky. It disguises itself in so many different ways that we never see it as a giant. But it will control our life. The desire for a life of comfort will cause us to settle for good instead of the best. And remember, God always wants the best for you and I. That's why this is a giant that must be defeated. Jesus, when he was walking on this earth, he took time off. He relaxed. He recharged. He got away from it all. But he didn't come to this earth to relax. He didn't come to this earth to be comfortable. The trouble arises when our desire for safety and security and comfort become a dominant theme in our lives. When the drive for a good life replaces the drive for a God life. When we choose the easy over the safe, or the safe over obedience and faith. When we take a good thing and let it lull us into complacency. When we buy the idea that we've worked hard in one season of our lives, and so now we get to choose how we live in the next season. When we start believing it is our life and that we have the right to call the shots. When we make the number one decision factor every time is, will it make me happy? When we allow sin to remain because it's just too uncomfortable to deal with it. And that's why this is a dangerous giant. Because for most of us, let's be honest, for most of us, 90% of us, I'd say, it ain't going to be the bad things in life that derail us. It's going to be too much of the good stuff. It's not going to be the bad stuff that's going to derail us. It's going to be too much of the good stuff. So that's why we must deal with this. You know what this is, don't you? A bird's nest. And I think you talk about a comfort item. When the mama bird and they build that nest, and it's a marvel what they're able to do and how secure it is. Then they lay those eggs and then they hatch them. and then they spend all that time feeding those birds and getting them strong and ready, but that is not where a bird lives, is it? As much time and effort went into a bird's nest, that is not where they live. Because eventually, mama's going to push those birds right out of the nest. And somewhere between nest and ground, they're going to learn how to fly. You know, I think that's a little picture of what the Christian life is. It's that, sure, we need a safe place to be born into the faith and a place to grow and to be strong. But we don't stay there. We don't stay in a life of comfort. Jesus didn't create us. He didn't create the church to make a safe place for us to be. He didn't set up the church for us so he could just keep running back and forth feeding us and not spending time in the world. Christ came into the world to send us into the world. Jesus told a story about a very successful man. You're going to remember this story. Luke chapter 12 says this. And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. And then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And he goes on in verse 19. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich towards God. Jesus doesn't resent us having things we enjoy, having things that bring us comfort. He doesn't resent that. The point of this story is that there are more important things in life than the comfort things of life. There's more important things. That we are called to more than just being comfortable. That there are more opportunities in life than just making money and having experiences and doing things that we enjoy doing. You see, and so far, I haven't said anything about David and Goliath, and this is a series about David and Goliath. But look back here. How did comfort play into how this story played out? 1 Samuel 17 is where this famous story is found, and we read that the Philistines and the Israelite army would line up on each side of the valley, and every day for 40 days they came out and they faced off with each other, and Goliath would come out and challenge them. 1 Samuel 17:16 says, for 40 days the Philistine came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. And remember, that's 80 times. 80 times he comes out, and they stood there ready to go to battle, and he makes his challenge, and the Israelites just turn and look at each other and said, not me, brother. Let's go back to the tent. Let's get something to eat, and we'll see what anything changes tonight. And they did this 80 times. 80 times they listened to the taunt of this giant, but went back to the comfort of their tents, the comfort of the fires. Went back to safety. David shows up, hears the taunt one time, and does more in 40 minutes than an entire army had done in 40 days. Ever wonder what might be not getting done because we're just sitting and waiting, and it's a little too uncomfortable to do something? It's easier to do nothing than to do something. We don't need to know everything to get into the battle. A bird doesn't know how to fly until it's out of the nest. David had never fought a 9-foot-tall giant before. He learned when he got out there on the battlefield. And we will learn when we get out there. Now, how do we make sure that we don't miss our opportunities? How do we learn and do like David did and not miss the opportunity to be obedient? I want to share a couple of things with you. First one is this. Remember that faith thrives in discomfort. You talk about going against the culture. Going against our nature is this very thought, that our faith actually grows when we're uncomfortable. Hebrews 11 is known as the Hall of Faith, the Hall of Fame. And it's just a list of some of the greatest Christians, greatest followers of Christ, followers of God throughout history. Hebrews 11, 1 and 2 kind of starts it off saying this way. It says, now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. And if you take the time to read Hebrews 11, it just names person after person, and sometimes it tells the act of faith that they did that brought them this credibility. Or if you go and read in other places, after you read these places, you see that they lived uncomfortable lives. Read this for yourself and think about the uncomfortableness of their lives, how they lived. And what I mean is they weren't seeking comfort. They were seeking obedience. They were seeking faith. And when you do that, it gets exciting. It gets memorable. It gets uncomfortable. And all of their stories hinge on uncomfortable moments. Jesus' mission on this earth, it was about discomfort. There's nothing comfortable about what Jesus came to do. Nothing comfortable about leaving heaven, coming to this earth. Nothing comfortable about going to the cross. You remember the communion meditation last week that Doug did? He talked about that going to the cross was a decision. It wasn't feeling, it was decision, because there was nothing that drew him to the cross that felt good. Jesus' whole mission on this earth was uncomfortable. You remember that song that we sing? On a hill far away stood an old smooth cross. Or was it a shiny cross? Or was it an old soft cross? No. It says, on a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. His whole mission was uncomfortable. Can you name anything in the Christian life that's completely comfortable? Resisting sin? No, it gets very uncomfortable. Putting others before ourselves? That's very uncomfortable. Denying self, becoming more like Jesus? That's a lot of work. It's uncomfortable. But faith thrives, it grows, it spreads in what you could call holy discomfort. Nothing worth having in life comes without a cost. Absolutely nothing. Second thing to remember is this. Remember to align yourself with God. How do we make sure we don't miss the opportunities or slip back into a life ruled by comfort? We align ourselves with God. And any of us can slip into following what the world says is the thing we should do. It's all around us. It's easier. We're bombarded with it. It's more natural to swim with the current than swim against it. But we're not called to follow our neighbor. We're called to follow Christ. We need the attitude of a 12-year-old. A 12-year-old Jesus. Remember when his parents found him at the temple after he'd been missing? They found him and said, "What are you doing, Jesus?" And this is what Jesus said in Luke 2:49. "Why were you searching for me?" he asked. "Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house?" Or it could be translated, or about my Father's business. That's the attitude. Jesus then spent so much of his ministry trying to align us with God. He said things like, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. He said things like, seek first the kingdom of God, and all these other things will be added to you. He said, love your neighbor as yourself. He said, if anybody slaps you in the face, he said, turn the other cheek. Turn the other cheek to them, let them slap you there too. He says, do to others as you would have them do unto you. He spent so much of his time trying to align us with God. Remember this. I hope you never get tired of hearing me say this. From a sermon series years ago. Direction, not intention, determines outcome. Direction, not intention, determines outcome. That is a motto to live by. And this is our illustration. If you want to go to Disney World, if you take time off work, you buy the tickets, you make motel reservations, you save up your money, you get the family all keyed up and everything, you gas the car up, you get everything checked out, and you pull out on the highway and head north on 17, I don't care how much you want to be at Disney World, how much you're looking forward to it, you head north, you're not going to get to Disney World. Direction, not intention, determines outcome. And aligning ourselves with God heads us in the direction that we're supposed to be in. It will take us where we need to be. Third thing is this. Remember that life is short. Life is short. And what are we going to do with it? What are we going to do with this little blip in history are we going to do? Are we going to be selfish and short-sighted? Or are we going to do something with it that impacts eternity? I wonder if decades later that David's 3 brothers who were on the battlefield, the battle lines, those 40 days, or not just his 3 brothers, we could say the whole Israeli army, I wonder if they had regrets. I wonder if years later they looked back and said, man, I wish we would have done different. I wish on that first day we wouldn't have said, we're not going to listen to these taunts. I wish we would have done something different. They chose to waste their days instead of claim their days. And we waste ours with sentiments like, well, if I was older, or if I were younger, in my younger days, or if I was bigger, if I was stronger, if I had more knowledge, if I knew more about the Bible, well, when I have enough money saved up, when the kids are out of the house, and it goes on and on. But God is breaking into our story and screaming, don't waste the time you have. Don't waste this. Don't stay on the sidelines and watch history go by while you're enjoying something else. Just a few weeks ago, this just captured me so much, a commentary of our times. You remember one of the congressional shootings? They were at the ballpark, and the guy attacked them and just started shooting. Did you see on the news where there were some 2 young men who were there, had nothing to do with it, and they started filming with their phones. And they're laying down the ground and they're filming through the fence, and you hear the gunshots going off. And then you hear one of the guys say to the other one, did anybody call 911? And the other guy said, yeah, I assume so. Their first thought was to film this instead of get involved and call somebody that could help and maybe save people's lives. I remember, time gets away so fast. It's probably 5 years or so ago now. There was a car wreck over on the outside of Greenville. A van ran off the road and went down the embankment. Some of you might remember that. Mike Moore, our own Mike Moore, just happened to be one of the cars that was coming along and saw it happen. He was one of the first on the scenes. He jumps out of his car and he runs down the bank. Some other people did the same thing. They run down and they're trying to help these people, and they were very seriously injured, and I believe 1 or 2 of them were killed. And Mike said they were down there and they're trying to help these people, and he looked up on the bank and said there was about 10 people there had their cell phones videoing. He said it just infuriated him. Are we going to get involved, or are we just going to stand on the sidelines and watch it all go by? Are we going to run down the bank and get involved with a messy situation? Life is short, and we have a lot to do. Paul said this about living a meaningful life for Christ in 1 Corinthians 9:26. He said, therefore I do not run like a man running aimlessly. I do not fight like a man beating the air. He said, I have a purpose what I'm out here doing. And just a few verses before that is when he says that line that we've come to know and use as a motto for our lives, run in such a way as to win the prize. A life of complacency or comfort is a life that has lost direction. And if we allow this giant to reign in our lives, we're going to waste our lives on things that just simply do not last. Hey, life is short, but God is big. Life is short, but God is big, and He can do some awesome things with the little short lives that we have. He can do some awesome things that will impact eternity. I asked earlier, do you wonder if those guys, the Israeli army, David's 3 brothers, have ever had regrets? Let me tell you what I think the biggest mistake they made. The biggest mistake I think they made. Now, an army is an army. That means it's a bunch of people. Guys have lined up to fight. And that's what was happening in the valley that day, or those days. They lined up to fight, and they've got their swords and their spears and ready to go, and they're ready to get it on. But one man steps out and changes the rules. He says, just send one out and fight me, and the winner takes all. And what did they do? They allowed him to change the rules. That wasn't the rules for battle. But they let one man freeze a whole nation because they let him change the rules. I don't know about you, but I'd like to think if I was on the sidelines, I'd be thinking, good gracious, that's a tall joker. Ain't no way I can beat him. But I bet you if somebody went and stuck him in the foot with their spear while another one was running at him from the left side and another one was throwing something at his head so he would duck, I bet you we could bring that sucker down. Don't let the world change the rules for you. Don't let the world change the rules. Who says we have to fight by their rules? God said, seek first the kingdom of God, and then I'll give you everything else you need. He did not say seek your own kingdom and give God what's left over. Ephesians 2:10, Paul said this, he said, for we are God's workmanship, we are God's masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Hey, you may never have a whole nation waiting for you to take the first step. I doubt we'll ever be in that situation. But you may have a whole family waiting for you to take the first step. To step forward and be brave. And to make a sacrifice and say, no, we're not doing that. We're doing this. You may not even have a whole family, but you might have a husband or a wife who needs somebody to step out. You may have a girlfriend, a boyfriend who needs somebody to step out. You may just have a friend who's on the fringe and just needs that one little person stepping forward. You may have an employee, a coworker that needs somebody. You may teach a Sunday school class. You may teach a class. You may be a public school teacher, and you got a whole classroom of kids that need somebody to step up and step out. God is inviting us to be part of His plan to save the world. That's the bottom line. He's inviting us to be a part of His plan to save the world. But you're not going to be able to do that and stay comfortable either. Because comfort and obedience will eventually butt heads. It will come into conflict. It's going to be scary. It's going to be sacrifice. And it's going to be uncomfortable at times. But boy, is it going to be exciting. And is it going to be memorable? If you want to defeat the giant of comfort, then get in the fight. Eric is going to come and lead us in our time of decision. If there's somebody here that needs to make a decision for Christ, and it needs to do something publicly up here, please don't wait. Just do it today. Many of you can sit right there where you're at and make a decision saying, I'm changing the way I spend my money. I'm changing the way I'm spending my time. I'm changing what stays on my mind and in my heart all the time. And I'm going to align myself with God and make a difference. You can do that right where you sit. But either place, there or here, Will you do it?